He was just doing his job, serving tables in a crowded restaurant, unnoticed by most, invisible to some. But then in a quiet moment, he spoke a language few expected. What happened next wasn't applause or admiration. It was a reaction so powerful, it exposed how deep prejudice still runs. A billionaire was watching, and his response would turn a simple shift into a moment the world couldn't ignore. How could a single sentence in another tongue spark a chain of events that revealed the truth about who we are? It was a busy afternoon in the heart of the city, the kind of day when the clatter of dishes and the hum of conversations blended into a single rhythm. For Marcus, a young waiter who had worked at the restaurant for years, this rhythm was familiar. He moved swiftly between tables, balancing trays, taking orders, and offering the polite smile that customers expected. To most, he was simply part of the background, efficient, dependable, almost invisible. But behind that quiet smile was someone who carried more than plates. Marcus had grown up in a neighborhood where opportunity was rare, where being overlooked was often safer than being noticed. He had learned to keep his head down, to work hard, to let his actions speak louder than his presence. Yet he also carried something special, a love of languages, a gift he had taught himself late at night with old textbooks and worn-out recordings. German, French, Spanish, he mastered each not because anyone demanded it, but because he believed knowledge was power. Still, the world rarely saw that side of him. In the restaurant, Marcus was just the waiter, the man who refilled glasses and cleared plates, never the man with a story, never the man with hidden brilliance. But all it took was one unexpected moment, a casual conversation in German, spoken softly to help a visiting customer feel at home, for that hidden part of him to surface. What Marcus didn't know was that this small act, almost ordinary to him, was being watched. And not just by anyone. A man with wealth, power, and influence was paying close attention. The reaction that followed would prove that even the simplest words can spark something far greater than we imagine. Marcus carried on with his shift, unaware that his voice had cut through the air like a spark in dry grass. The German words had rolled off his tongue effortlessly, meant only to comfort a nervous tourist struggling to order a meal. To him, it was nothing extraordinary. To others, it was something they weren't prepared to accept. At the next table, a group of diners fell silent. Their eyes shifted, their expressions hardened. Whispers began. A few chuckled dismissively, as if mocking the very idea that a black waiter could speak another language fluently. One man leaned back in his chair, sneering, loud enough for Marcus to hear. Bet he learned that from a movie. No way he actually knows what he's saying. Marcus's stomach tightened, but he didn't respond. He had faced this kind of quiet dismissal before. The disbelief, the condescending laughter, the way people questioned his abilities without ever knowing his story. He continued his work, keeping his head high, but the whispers grew. Some of the customers smirked, shaking their heads. For them, Marcus wasn't a person with hidden talent. He was just an easy target for their prejudice. But what Marcus didn't realize was that someone else had been listening. Someone who wasn't laughing. At the far corner of the restaurant sat a man whose presence radiated quiet authority. His tailored suit, polished shoes, and guarded demeanor set him apart. A billionaire, though few in the room even knew his name. He watched closely, his eyes narrowing as the room shifted from curiosity to ridicule. Then came the moment Marcus would never forget. A woman from the whispering group waved him over with a sharp snap of her fingers. When he approached, she leaned in, her smile dripping with condescension. "Say something else in German," she demanded, her tone more of a test than a request. The table laughed quietly, waiting for him to stumble, waiting to expose him as a fraud. Marcus felt the weight of their stares pressing on him. He wanted to walk away, but years of service had taught him to keep his composure. So he spoke again, this time a longer phrase, fluid and precise, the kind of sentence only someone who truly understood the language could deliver. The tourist he had helped earlier nodded gratefully, confirming Marcus's words. But instead of respect, the table responded with louder laughter. One man muttered, "Show off," while another said, "Bet he's just memorizing lines." Their prejudice was louder than their reason, and Marcus knew no matter what he said, it would never be enough for them. His gift wasn't just dismissed, it was turned against him, twisted into another reminder that for some, his skin color spoke louder than his talent. The air grew heavy. The billionaire continued to watch, saying nothing. Marcus returned to his duties, his chest tight with frustration. He had been proud of his skill, proud of the hours he had spent late at night mastering every word. Yet here he was, reduced to a spectacle, treated like a curiosity to be mocked. And then came the turning point. When the mocking table left, they did so with smirks, their laughter trailing out the door. Marcus thought the moment had passed, another painful memory to carry in silence. But the man in the corner hadn't moved. He sat, still and deliberate, his eyes fixed on Marcus with an intensity that felt almost unsettling. The billionaire finally rose, leaving behind a folded note and something else that made Marcus freeze in his tracks. It wasn't a tip, it was far more than that. His hands trembled as he reached for it, his mind racing with questions. What could possibly be written on that note? And why did it feel like his life was about to change in ways he could never predict? Marcus unfolded the note with trembling hands, the chatter of the restaurant fading into silence around him. At first, he thought it might be just another receipt, another meaningless piece of paper left behind by a stranger. But the words scrawled across it made his chest tighten. I see you. Don't let them make you smaller than you are. And beneath the note, tucked neatly inside, was something even more shocking. A check. Not for a generous tip. Not for hundreds. For thousands. Enough to pay months of rent, enough to erase debts, enough to remind Marcus that his worth could not be measured by the sneers of strangers. For a split second, Marcus felt a wave of disbelief, a rush of gratitude. But then came the heavier truth. Why had it taken a billionaire's recognition for his talent to matter? Why did it take wealth, status, and power to validate something he had worked for years to achieve? The check in his hand wasn't just a gift. It was a mirror reflecting the brutal reality he had always known. He looked around the restaurant. The mocking table was gone, but their laughter still echoed in his mind. He thought about the countless times he had been dismissed, underestimated, laughed at, not because he lacked skill, but because of the color of his skin. And now, this moment, this gesture, was both a lifeline and a reminder. The world was watching, but only some people's voices carried enough weight to make others listen. Tears stung his eyes, though he blinked them back. Marcus had never wanted pity. He had wanted respect. He had wanted the simple acknowledgement that his effort, his knowledge, his humanity mattered. The note told him one person had seen that truth, but it also screamed that so many others never would. And as Marcus stood frozen, the check still in his hand, he realized something chilling. This wasn't the end of the story. This was the beginning of a choice. Would he stay silent, pocket the gift, and move on? Or would he take this moment, this pain, and force the world to see what it had tried so long to ignore? Marcus left the restaurant that night with the note, and the check still folded tightly in his hand. To anyone watching, it might have looked like a victory, a story of a kind stranger, a life changed with a single gesture. But Marcus knew better. Money could pay bills, but it couldn't erase the humiliation of being mocked for daring to be more than what others assumed. It couldn't undo the stares, the laughter, the disbelief that someone like him could hold knowledge, talent, or dignity. For days, he kept the note in his pocket, not because of the check, but because of the words written in hurried ink. I see you. Those 3 words carried more weight than the numbers on the paper. They reminded him of the truth he had always known. He didn't need permission to exist fully, to speak proudly, to carry his talents into the light. But the incident stayed with him. It wasn't just about one table of diners or one act of generosity. It was about a system of quiet, persistent dismissal that people like Marcus faced every day. How many voices had been silenced? How many dreams had been mocked into ashes before they ever had a chance to rise? The billionaire's note may have lit a spark, but Marcus understood the bigger picture. Change doesn't come from one wealthy man noticing what others ignore. It comes when society stops treating worth as something conditional, something granted only when power says so. His story was just one among thousands, each a thread in a fabric of injustice that still wraps tightly around communities everywhere. So Marcus made a decision. He would not let the laughter define him. He would not let the check be the end of the story. Instead, he carried the note as a reminder that visibility matters, that being seen should not be a privilege granted by the powerful, but a right that belongs to everyone. And as you hear this story, ask yourself, how many more times will we wait for a billionaire's approval before we start seeing people for who they truly are? How many more moments of brilliance will we laugh away simply because of the color of someone's skin? Because the truth is, Marcus's story is not just his, it's ours, and until we choose to face it, it will keep repeating.